Okay.
Okay, Hilarie Burhans, thank you for being on Oldtime Central.
Thank you for having me, Benson.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. So for this interview, I decided to do something different, which was to not ask my stock questions of how you started playing old time and and why it's important to you, but ask other people what questions they wanted to ask. Does that sound okay?
That sounds fine.
Okay.
Blame on me.
Well, you're well known as a banjo teacher, both in workshops, but then also a lot of people through your YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And somebody wanted to know how you managed to break things down so clearly and explain to people in such clear ways.
Yeah, well, I do one thing I don't hear other people do. Well, for one thing, okay, let me back up a little bit on this. When I look at a lot of the videos that people are teaching online or tablature people put out, which I don't actually read tablature, but I can look at it and go, whoa, you know. A lot of this stuff, they seem well suited for if you're going to sit by yourself, you know, in your room and play some pretty version of a tune, but then you get to a jam and all of a sudden everybody's playing the tune way faster, if they're playing that tune at all. And you find that all those notes that you learned and you're trying to stick in there, you don't have the facility to be able to do that. And what I try to do is to make it more like the versions that I would play in a jam, which gets rid of a lot of the fiddle's job of to play all those extra notes, and gets down to what I think of as the core of what you're doing with the banjo is be the drum,
right.
and sketch out the melody.
Right.
And suggest the chords, especially if there's not someone playing a guitar or bass, whatever, there too. And so I teach those versions, which are simplified.
Right.
And
often simplified in terms of the melody.
Very often,
right.
yeah. And I usually, at a certain point, I start suggesting to my students and to other people that they stop learning tunes from other banjo players and start learning melodies from fiddle players.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the outline of the melody and what you would hum or whistle if you were going to play that tune,
right.
and figure out how to play it on the banjo. Yeah. Now that's a leap for a lot of people. At a certain point, there is a benefit to learning tunes note by note from an instructor because in the beginning,
right.
But after 20 tunes or so, I think that benefit is pretty small. But what you are learning in the beginning is kind of an alphabet with which you will be able to elicit the sounds you want to do.
Right.
So you learn to do sort of, bluegrass, can't even say it, bluegrass players talk about runs, but there are things we do over and over again.
Sure, yeah.
And actually, I really like every once in a while really looking hard at another banjo player and seeing how they do what I would do and how different it is, and, trying a little bit of that out.
Right.
But for the most part, I've been very unacademic about the whole thing right from the get-go. But what I do that I don't see other people do is I have a kind of a language that seems to work for people. People saying bum-ditty has fallen out of fashion among some people. I've been excoriated by various people online for using the term bum-ditty, but that's how I was taught, and it worked for me. So what I do, can I just demonstrate?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so, and what I do is I call this a bum-ditty. So bum-ditty, and then I start right off, and I explain hand position and what I like to see as position of holding and stuff. And then right off the bat, after we've learned this, which is 1, 2, and a bum-ditty, we go with 1 and 2 and so a drop thumb. People will put off doing any drop thumbs for a long time, and then there's this big hurdle they can't get over, and I just always first lesson,
Right.
I mean, and then
get the hard part over.
And I would say drop thumb ditty, and then if I wanted to do a pull off, I'll say pull off ditty, and a hammer on ditty, pull off ditty, drop thumb, pull off, and I just say it, and I don't know, I'm trying to remember the name of it. When people are learning tabla, and I lived in Pakistan when I was a kid, there's a whole...
it's like kind of solfege.
I forget the name, yeah. And you learn to say it before you learn to play it, and it makes sense to me. And it makes sense to some people. They love that.
Right.
It really helps them.
Right.
Other people take it or leave it, or rather I left it, that's fine. It's just clogging up the works for them. But as a teacher, because I've been a teacher of adults mostly all my life, although my degree is in elementary education, but I've never worked as an elementary school teacher.
Maybe they fit together well.
But no, I've taught adults basic literacy. I've taught culinary arts in the prison system. I've just taught adults a lot, and I actually really do love when I have a one-on-one lesson, whether it's Skype or face-to-face. I love figuring out how to make, you try something, they're not getting it, how else can I do it? And I love the challenge of trying to figure out, how is this person learning? How do they learn? What's the best thing for them? And trying different ways until you find something that sticks. Or saying, you know what, hold the phone, you're getting all snarled up, let's get a drink of water, and walk around. We'll come back. It'll be, you'll have it instantly. You're making this way too hard. And so if the question was how do I break them down, is I can think of them in the same way.
Right.
And so it's pretty simple for me to, now if it's a tune that I have not taught before, and somebody, which very often the tunes, I teach are ones somebody has said, gee, I'd really like to learn to play, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, let me, tell me which version you're looking for. Send me a YouTube or something.
Right.
Send me a link, and I'll listen to it, and,
Yeah.
and maybe I'll make it for you. And I do. I'm more apt to if they come with a little PayPal donation.
Sure. Because it's work.
Because it's work. It takes some time, especially if I don't even know the tune. At first I got to figure out how I would play it.
Right.
But then what makes it difficult is it's not like a tune I've taught a bunch of times and I play the same way every time. I'm obviously still finding my way. And so it gets a little confusing when I'm explaining.
Right.
But still, apparently, according to the feedback that I get on my channel, it still makes more sense than a lot of people's instructional banjo videos. Right. I guess.
So. Well, sort of a related question. We had a banjo player here in Berlin taught a workshop a few weeks ago, and there was a group of people, many of whom were relatively beginner to old-time banjo, and several of them during the workshop had the realization that they don't actually, they'd imagined learning old-time banjo to be much more complicated than it actually was, or at least the way he was teaching it, because they thought that their job as the banjo player was very similar to the fiddle players. Right. They had to learn the tune in a particular way.
Right.
And he was saying, look, no, you need to lay down the rhythm, you need to outline the chords, and then you can highlight bits of melody here and there, but which bits of melody you highlight is kind of your own choice, and you certainly don't have to play every note in order to hang.
Right.
And I sort of, the more I pay attention to banjo players, because there are lots of different banjo players, but a lot of sort of a big core, it seems like, in old time, they sort of act like this glue between the fiddle player and the guitar player, as it were, right? The guitar is really just laying down the chords and some basic rhythm. Right. And the fiddle player is primarily laying down the melody and a little bit of melody,
some sort of bass runs,
something
stuff,
in there,
mostly.
and the banjo is like kind of like holding hands with both of them, but how they do that is really very, very flexible. It
is, and since I get so many people who come to me from a point where they've learned a bunch of tunes note by note from somebody, but now they want to be able to go to a jam and just play. And I get a lot of people at that stage, and I like that because sometimes they've learned all this stuff, they haven't learned chords. They haven't learned to hear chord changes. They haven't learned Nashville number system. So if they're in a jam and somebody's saying 4 or 5, they don't know what that is.
Right.
And so with those folks, we start off with any tune that they already know the melody of. I don't mean necessarily an old time tune. Mary Had a Little Lamb. I don't care.
Sure.
And work on hearing where there is a chord change. And then you've only got, if it's a 3-chord tune, you've only got 2 options.
Right.
You try one. If it sounds wrong, it's the other one.
Right.
Yeah. And listen to where there are chord changes and so forth. And a lot of banjo players I know, they're really not that tuned into chords. They'll play the melody notes that they probably do know more than they think they know, because obviously they've been around this music for a while, they know a bunch of tunes. But at our home jam, we basically have a fiddler usually.
Really?
Yeah. And
poor guy or gal.
Guy. And if he's really exhausted from a hard day at work, it's
Am I gonna face this
too bad,
phalanx of banjo?
Yeah, and then there'll be me drowning out the other 2 banjo players who are both students or ex-students of mine, and a couple guitar players who are still kind of on the learning end of things, and Mark Pokey Hallenberg, who's an awesome addition to any jam if you like banjo uke, which I happen to love. Right. So he and I and an excellent bass player, the guitar players will kind of look at Pokey's fingers because they've learned his chord shapes on banjo uke. Yeah. If Pokey's not there, then it's more work for me, and I end up playing more chords than just melody notes because somebody's got to help a little bit on that end
Right,
of things. It's far more easy and fun to play when there's a competent, knowledgeable guitar player, bass player, whatever, then you don't have to do as much work.
You're freer.
It's always fun to play with people who are better than you are.
Well, that's the eternal problem, isn't it?
It is. But people who, if you're better than somebody else, it's kind of your duty and should be sort of a joy to help them along.
Right. Right.
I mean, I don't get when people get all, there are times, like say at Clifftop,
Sure.
I figure there's going to be a certain number of jams. I'm going to be in playing with people who they're my students, but here they're coming to Clifftop, and I've known them through Skype or whatever, but they want to, and other people, I'm going to play in jams with them. Then they're going to be in jams when I just want to sit down and play with Reese and John, and it's just like you got to have something for you, but you also give back a little, because how did you learn to play? Other people putting up with your wrong note choices and stuff,
Right. Well, talk a little bit more about that, because that was another question that someone asked, which was just that you seem very clearly, both in your teaching and in just how you interact with people in the old time community at large, to be active in sort of giving back and teaching people and just being inclusive. Which not everybody is. I mean, sort of the community has gotten that reputation, and a lot of them are, but everybody makes their own.
Sure.
Everybody walks with their own 2 feet.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from?
I know right where that comes from. When I learned to play banjo, I was in high school. I was starting to play banjo when I was in high school in Athens, Ohio, and I noticed you have a Stuart McDonald guitar
plan
on the wall. Stuart McDonald is in my town.
Yeah, I know.
As they're my peeps. Anyway, I learned from a guy named Saul Tate, who I doubt he ever plays banjo anymore or anything, but he owned a local music store, Blue Eagle. And I would go in there, and I was kind of the run for the lunch girl, they'd give me some money, and I'd go down to Big Boy and buy the burgers and bring them back for lunch. Okay. And I ran all these errands and stuff, and I tuned the auto harps and stuff, and then eventually I could get Saul to give me a little banjo lesson. So I had, 4 or 5 actual kind of sit down with this guy and learn the first 4 or 5 tunes that I learned. Mm-hmm. And, but there was no money that changed hands. And then I started going to festivals. And this was in the early and mid-'70s, Carter Caves, the Fraley Family Festival that JP and his wife, Vanadine, put on. And, there's some other ones. Anyway, I can remember so many times when I would say to somebody, I really love what you played, on stage just a little while ago. The tune that was... And they would see that I, this is on the path somewhere, walking from somewhere to somewhere. I remember somebody, one guy, I don't know who it was, said, "Oh yeah, banjo, you want to learn it?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And we unzipped our gig bags and sat down and under the tree, and he taught me the tune, And that happened. That sort of thing happened a number of times. Right. Where I, instead of being kind of intimidated by these folks, I just found them to be really open and giving, and so they were sort of my model, Right. Something about, it seemed like there was less of sort of, an elite cadre of, the primo old-time musicians and then the great unwashed or something. Right. There was more, everybody was doing it, back then.
Or even if there was a recognized elite in terms of just, skill or just, hours in the chair or whatever, that didn't translate then into being, unavailable or unwelcoming. Or
I remember going to something in some jam, it's near some kind of old, like a working farm, thing, jam, Hale Farm and Village or something like that near Cleveland, really early on, and kind of hanging near the outskirts of a jam that was like Carrie Blesh and Lisa Ornstein, and I don't know who all was there, but they were amazing players who kind of just, but I remember Lisa asking me how long I played the banjo, and she told me I had such a great ear for picking up stuff that I didn't know, right. and Carrie and I talked about something or other. I mentioned some, flamingo decal he had on his case. Like a month, he took down my address, and like 3 weeks later, he mailed me a letter, and it had these flamingo decals in it. It's just really nice stuff.
Sure.
Really nice people.
Right. And
so I figured, people taught me for free. I can teach them for free. And I charge for lessons, but I'm told by a lot of my friends I don't charge nearly enough. And I did start finally putting on some of my YouTube videos. I put a little thing that says, if you found this helpful, then you want to help me keep them coming and keep them ad-free, because I haven't monetized the videos.
Right. Please
feel free to send a PayPal donation of any size to contradance@gmail.com.
Right.
Well, people do that sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's such a lovely thing to get get it in the mail, or get it in the get a little note that says thank you for what you do. It's
and
a
anybody
shot
listening
every day.
Anybody listening needs to go find that.
Oh yeah, right. So this is Mike in the Wilderness. It's an A tune, and although it sounds like Microphone in the Wilderness, I think it's the current thinking is that it's named for this Civil War general, Micah somebody, who lost his life in the Battle of the Wilderness, a particularly brutal Civil War battle, from friendly fire, sort of badly named thing, but he was accidentally shot by his own troops. So, try again.
I want to learn that tune.
It's a good tune. It's one of that whole family of tunes that's so A tunes, when you first start out, you start thinking A tunes are like G tunes. Why couldn't you just play it? And you could, you could play cross G or whatever. But they have a thing that tunes that are just in G don't have. For one thing, they've not always, but so many of them, there's this whole family of them that have that 7 chord. And they very often on the piano, there's always that thing that has a big interval where you're hitting that open 4th string on the banjo. So that you've got tunes like Ways of the World and Ducks in the Pond and Jeff Sturgeon, Georgia Horseshoe, this one, Mike in the Wilderness, Little Whiskey, Salt River. There's this whole bunch of tunes that are all in the same kind of family, and they're some of my favorite tunes. I love them. I love them. But
so, to this discussion about just how just how welcoming and inclusive and just sort of open people seem to be often in the old time community. I think sort of an open question for me is, to what extent in your experience is that something that's just the way those people are and they happen to take part, they happen to be old time musicians? Or to what extent is that like a thing that like is part of, I don't know, I mean I'm obviously not being as eloquent as I'd like to be, but is that enacted in the old time community, a kind of sort of space outside of normal life,
right?
Which is a judgment. I mean, neither one comes with any particular judgment. But it's...
Right. I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer that. I grew up in a family with a dad who was a jazz pianist, and I grew up with jam sessions every Sunday.
Right.
You know, my mom would put on a bunch of coffee and their beer, you know, either one, and whatever. And people would drop by and they'd play. They'd kind of take turns on the drums or whatever, you know. And so I grew up thinking this music is just a participatory sport, not a spectator sport.
Right.
And I did not go the route of, say, my dad, you know, but in high school I kind of fell for somebody who was learning how to play the fiddle and scheming how to get to hang out with this dude, you know. I started playing first auto harp because that was the instrument that fell into my lap, and then banjo. And it worked. I mean, we're still together,
right.
So I guess it worked.
You got the boy.
But I did, you know, learn to like it for its own sake, like immediately. You know what I mean? I mean, it really grabbed me. Of course, I was part of this whole, you know, kind of live in a log cabin, wear long skirts, you know, go to these festivals, and, you know, the old-timey looking your old cotton dresses from the 40s and that you got at the flea market, you know, the better.
Right.
And that's kind of the way we were then. And it was, we made our own, you know, fun.
Yeah.
It was, we kind of tried to live somewhat as those people that we kind of looked up to had lived, you know. And I don't mean we took it to extremes like some people that I know do, but, you know, that was just kind of the way it was.
Sure.
We were hippies who were kind of into old time music.
Right,
you know? And because of that, I think there was a lot of sharing that went on.
Right.
You know, sharing was kind of a thing, you know.
Right.
So I wasn't very clear there either, but. You know.
Well, no, I think it interests me because it seems like there's often a discussion around the dichotomy of sort of reality or nostalgia, and nostalgia is often the negative. The negative term, the negative connotation, whereas my personal experience is that a lot of the way people interact and treat one another in the old time community is a kind of nostalgia or enactment, but in a way that then is embodied in the now, in a way that resonates very strongly with me, positively with me. And so it's like, yes, it's where there's a recognition that, okay, the dominant cultural mores of the old time community are not those of broader society. But that doesn't mean that it's some kind of play. But that it's just saying, okay, this is something that we value, and so even if it's not the norm, that's the way we're going to try and spend a good chunk of our time. Yeah. And it therefore becomes reality. It's kind of idealism that becomes reality through doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's there is I don't know. No response to that.
Wow.
After all that.
I stumped Hilarie.
Stumped Hilarie. That doesn't happen every day of the week. No. Yeah, I'm going to have to ask me a question.
Okay. I'll ask you a question. All right.
Oh.
Yeah?
Well, I guess one thing that kind of the question before the last one, if that was a question, when we were talking about back up. Okay, we go to Appalachian String Band Festival, Clifftop. And it's been going on for I forget how many years now. We went the first 3 years. And then we just didn't go back. We found it very hard to sort of break into Clifftop society. People they didn't seem that friendly. They would come with the same people that they hung around and played tunes with at home.
Right.
And you couldn't get into a jam. And of course, banjo players especially have this problem because there's a lot of times it's sort of unwritten one banjo per jam kind of rule.
Right.
And it was just not so fun, so we quit going.
Right.
So years later, a friend of ours who camped in the area where we camp now, which is where people from Virginia, rather than Ohio where we're from, tend to camp, she urged us to come back, and we kind of said, well, we had done that, but she said, no, come camp where I camp. Everybody's super friendly and blah, blah, blah. So we thought, well, okay, it's been years and years and years. We'll give it a shot. Right. So Mark and I talked about this. I said, how can we go and have a really good time? And they said, well, let's not go to other people. Let's let them come to us. We'll do what we do, which is we'll feed people. We'll be hosts and hostess and ply them with beer. Well, no, not beer because it's Clifftop. Right. But delicious food, and we'll just make friends from the people near us, and we'll just do it. Right. So we did. We went and we did what we do. We used to have like a lot of dinner parties at home. Now we have a restaurant, so you never have another dinner party again. You just say, let's go to the restaurant. But at Clifftop, we started just sort of having lots of people over for dinner, and it kind of snowballed. Kinda. Yeah, so now, we have, for a while I was doing, 6 or 7 dinners during the 9 days of Clifftop. Now we have people for dinner 5 times. Right. The most we have usually is about 350 people for the Indian dinner on Friday. Right. And then you came in on the ground floor of the newest meal that we're doing once we got the pizza oven. Right. You're my pizza god, helping us make all those pizzas. But and all this, of course, is in a place with no kitchen. No kitchen. Well, we have a kitchen. Right. Yeah. But you don't have electricity. You don't have running water. We bring a couple hundred gallons of water and. We bring the kitchen sink and everything else, and water heater, everything. So but I've always been like, more the merrier, bring it on. Nobody makes reservations, or anything. I don't like it when people refer to it as a restaurant, because we don't charge any money. We do have a donation box. People can help us to defray the cost of the ingredients and stuff. But nobody's forced to put anything in it,
Right.
And
it's not a thing. It's just
not
Burhania.
A thing. It's a Burhania. It's our little kingdom, our little queendom, and we. I have a superpower, which is making things come out even, and it is amazing how well it works sometimes. And it's a great thing for a cook to have, is this ability to make things come out even. If you're making a whole bunch of hors d'oeuvres and they're fussy little things where you take one of these, and this, skewer this, and blah, 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 to have it all come down to the last one of this, last one of this, last one of this, which is what you grabbed and put, there, is a good superpower to have.
Yeah.
And at Clifftop, I can't tell you how many times I'm the last person to eat because I've been standing there heating the tortillas or frying the papadum or whatever.
Right.
At the very end, the line is gone.
Right.
And it's time for me to eat, and I take the last of the beans and the last of the salsa and the last of the meat, and make my burrito.
Right.
I don't know how that works. I don't know why, but the whole thing is this giant loaves and fishes act every time.
Right.
Either
God or the forest
if you
is
cook it, and the people
down,
come, it's all going to work out.
Right.
And that's what happens every time. Whether it rains or not, whether it's,
right.
it's bizarre, actually.
Right.
But,
well, another question that somebody asked was about sort of like your thoughts generally on community building, but specifically was wanting to know how you balance doing all of that and stay centered at the same time.
Well, whether I stay
which
centered...
I guess presumes that you do stay centered.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure about that. But yeah, mostly I do, I think. Because at heart, I'm basically sort of lazy. I'm either the hardest...
I'm all ears.
I'm either the hardest working lazy person you ever met, or I'm the laziest hardworking person you ever met. I don't know. But basically, I like to run around and get it done so I can, lie down.
Right.
I'm either on or I'm off, usually. I don't like all that in between where you're just kind of standing around. I don't like to work slowly. I just want to get it done. Right. And then put my feet up. And that's the way I kind of approach life in general. Right. And at Clifftop, talking about community building, there are a lot of people who are, sometimes there are people who love the music. They love the music. They love the vibe. They love everything. But they're not necessarily people who want to sit around and play music all day long. Mm-hmm. Or they're sort of more beginners and they don't have people to play with all day long, and but they still want to be involved and meet people and all that stuff. Well, those people come to Burhania and they volunteer to do some shopping, do some whatever, and they meet each other, and they meet us, and then they meet everybody we know, and I don't have to do very much. All my work for Clifftop is getting all the stuff and getting it all to Clifftop and setting it up. From that point on, it almost just sort of runs itself, and I don't worry, are enough volunteers going to show up, to do this thing? They always do. We usually have almost more than we can use. Yeah, but there are people who, they know if it's penne and with penne with peas and prosciutto night, they know exactly what they're going to do. Right. Last year I did this. I think I'm going to do that this year. Right. It's great. Yay,
That's true.
And sometimes I lie around and play the banjo while they're cooking up a storm, and they might ask me questions. Fortunately, I can talk and play banjo at the same time, so that's good.
And lay down.
Absolutely.
And
I learned to play the banjo lying, a lot of it was lying on my back. When I was just... I have heard that Dwight Diller, I think, does this sort of a workshop where basically you don't even touch the banjo with your left hand. You're just, the right hand for, days.
Right.
And when I first was learning the banjo, I did this. I would fall asleep in my bed doing this.
Right.
And I have been known
After you'd gotten the boy.
Yeah. I found I can actually fall asleep while playing music. Sometimes on stage while playing music if I'm really exhausted, and I wake up and I'm still playing. I slow down a little bit. I might be a little behind the
Your
beat.
time's not wonderful while you're asleep.
My timing is suffers if I play while I'm actually literally asleep. But it's, you know how when you're young and stupid and you fall asleep at the wheel because you're young and stupid, you know?
Unfortunately, I haven't done that, but I've heard about it.
Oh my God, you know. Well, if you live somewhere where these long, straight, boring drives, like
Iowa?
out west. Yeah, well, yeah, you've never fallen. Now I'm not going to say that I used to read books and drive at the same time. I wouldn't do that.
Right.
I wouldn't have done that.
But you've heard of people that did that.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So, but I got that right hand down, you know, and I suggest to other people that you just get that right hand down. I'm trying to remember who it is. Jorma Kakkonen, Jefferson Airplane, Hot Tuna and stuff. He lives in my town and eats at my restaurant all the time. And he told me, and I'm trying to remember who he said this. Told him, but he said, your left hand is what you know. Your right hand is who you are. And no matter what stringed instrument you play, it's so true. Your left hand is what you know, and your right hand is who you are. Whether you're bowing, you know, whether you're
Right.
And that's what I try to, you know. I have a really lousy left hand. That's one of the reasons I don't do all that fancy stuff.
Right.
You know, I accomplish what I need to do, you know, mostly with my right hand, and that's about it.
The famous Burhanian cluck.
The Burhanian cluck. Everybody's always asking me, can you tell me, can you teach me how to do that cluck? And
only once you get to level 24.
Grasshopper, you know, and I can't teach you. No, it's going to happen. That's all I can say. Is if you, I tell people the only things that I know, which is that for me, and this is your mileage will most definitely vary. My ring finger is very involved in my cluck. If I had no fingernail at all on my ring finger, I don't think I would really be very clucky. And for people who aren't familiar with what we're talking about, you're talking about that.
Yeah.
And all I can say to people is it's sort of a truncated brush. I'm sort of, it's a brush, but, and it has nothing to do with where. You can do it anywhere, although you might like the sound of it better in one place.
Sure.
So it's not like this harmonic right over this fret or something for me anyway.
Right.
You know, I hear people, all kinds of people. I have looked at what other people say about this, whether it's a clear head and they're looking from the other side and all this. I mean, it's using all of your fingers together as a unit.
Right.
Coming down, stopping your thumb on, which it should anyway, there, and letting your fingers continue on a little bit farther than they would. And that's all I know.
Okay.
I can't teach this.
So you can explain what you know, but you can't necessarily explain who you are.
Except that, yes, explain what you know, but you can't explain who you are, exactly. So, let's play Shoes and Stockings. Okay. So, Shoes and Stockings, we're going to play it in A. Henry Reed played it in A. One time, Alan Jabor pointed out in the recording that he played it in G last time, and we were playing it in G, but Mark says he likes to play it a little better in A, and I kind of agree.
Okay.
It's nice in A, so let's play it in A.
I thought it was because you like to play the banjo in it.
No, but that's where I am right now, so we need to